Should I stay or should I go now? Should I stay or should I go now? If I go there,
Hey, welcome back to Pagitt Radio on AM 950. Great conversation there with Philip Clayton. And now we're going to have a great one with Steve Knight, our Dark Knight. Steve has been a friend for a long time and is active on social media tools like Twitter. And he tweeted a little note to me about a website talking about nonprofit organizations being one of the bright spots in the development of jobs over the last decade. And I said to Steve, hey, could you come on the program and talk about this? Because I think it's quite interesting in a religious conversation, because most religious organizations are nonprofits, and many nonprofits are organized around the similar kinds of impulses, and from many of the same people who are involved in religious organizations. Steve, welcome to the radio program.
Thank you, Doug. Glad to be here.
I'm glad that you are on the show, and you're driving somewhere through North Carolina right now. Is that right?
That's right. Well, I pulled off to the side of the road so I could, have a good cell signal.
Direct your full attention to the
That's right.
radio program.
Well,
That's
yeah,
fantastic.
I guess attention would be an important thing to do.
You just did it because you wanted to keep your cell coverage.
Just like a tech would say.
Yeah, as you're driving as you're driving through North Carolina, where things are going to get interesting in the political fields.
What's the weather there, real quick, Steve?
That's right. It's gray and cloudy and just drab.
Good. Oh, good. That's how we're feeling here. Hey, Steve, what did you find interesting about this terrific little report about nonprofit organizations? I know you sent it off to tag me on Twitter in it, and I think it's great. Tell me what you were finding interesting about it.
Well, this is a brand new report that just came out from 3 researchers at Johns Hopkins University. A little something called the Johns Hopkins Nonprofit Economic Data Project. Mm-hmm. And this is the first report that's really compiled all of this data over the last 10 years, so from 2000 to 2010, of nonprofit employment, and kind of how nonprofits have fared over this last decade, including these last few years of recession. And what the data shows is that nonprofits have fared pretty well and have actually steadily grown as opposed to the for-profit sector, which has receded, especially during these last few years, 2007 to 2009. There was a 3.7% drop in for-profit employment. At the same time, there was an increase in the nonprofit sector. Of 1.9% annually.
Yeah, I found that so interesting that over these last 10 years, in the midst of, they say in the report, 2 different recessions going on, that nonprofits have continued to grow and have added a lot of jobs. And I had no idea that the nonprofit sector, whatever that includes, all 50 states, and all their people, is the 3rd largest employment category in the United States. Retail, trade, right, manufacturing, and then the nonprofit sector. Yep.
10.7 million employees employed in the nonprofit sector.
That's incredible.
Yeah, I mean, it's huge. And what struck me when I was looking at this website that you sent along in that tweet, it struck me that I never hear anyone lobbying on behalf of the nonprofit sector. Right. For laws or I don't know, is there even a trade union or something? Is there a trade group for nonprofits? It employs the 3rd largest industry, and it doesn't seem like it ever, you don't hear politicians, you don't hear regular folks talking about how important it is that we invest in the nonprofit sector because it employs nearly 11% of the country's population.
Right. Well, that's an interesting point. I can't say for sure that there aren't lobbyists out there for the nonprofit sector, but you're right. You don't really hear about it.
Yeah, I've never heard about it. If there are, and if I haven't heard about it, then it really can't be. If it's true, it can't be meaningful. Right, if I haven't heard about it, I pay attention to all kinds of things. Well, what do you think this means for us, Steve? I mean, I know that you're somebody who works in the nonprofit sector, and you're somebody who thinks about these kinds of issues. What do you think this means for our situation that we find ourselves in a country in which jobs are so important, and changing economies and a changing economic system?
Well, it's a good question. I mean, I think it does pique your interest and make you recognize and hopefully appreciate a little bit more the diversity of nonprofit work that's being done out there. And you're right, the fact that it maybe isn't organized more in terms of having more political clout speaks to the just broad range of work that's being done, and it's not being coordinated for its own political advantage, but it's just good work that's being done out there, and I sent it to you because of this conference that's coming up in May, the Funding the Missional Church Conference, and I know one of the conversations around that is how successful the nonprofit world has been, and how unsuccessful the church world has been in terms of being able to really tell a compelling story and cast a vision and engage people and get people involved and supportive of the work that's doing in terms of financial sustainability. So there's a lot to be learned from these nonprofits in the work that they're doing and their ability to tell a compelling story and really engage people in generating the support that leads to this kind of job growth.
Yeah, I think it's terribly interesting because there's certain narratives that run through our collective imagination in a country. One of the things that makes a culture, and a country is that you end up with a similar set of stories being told. And one of the stories that's been told in our world over the last 30 or 40 years is that business and government are so important. For-profit and government, they sort of matter so much. And then people who work in the nonprofit world often feel like they're people who gave up doing the important things because they want to do this good thing. Like it's good for you working for those people, or good for you not being just tied up in the kinds of outcomes that are going to come for stockholders and so on. And that's really great that you choose to work in education, or you choose to work in that kind of nonprofit healthcare, or you choose to work in the social services area. Like, that's really great. Like a little pat on the back, like you give to the little brother. And what I found striking about this report was it said, oh, this isn't the little brother. This is the huge brother that's got 10% of the third largest industry, more than 10% of the American population that's employed in these areas. Maybe somehow that nonprofit sector feels a bit of a threat to the for-profit worlds or to the government world. Like, I wonder if this isn't indicating that there's going to be a shift in the public conversation in the United States. And I know that's it's asking for a lot of projection on your part, but it feels like some of these critiques that have been going on about cultural excesses is something that might be meaningful. That this conversation might be meaningful in that bigger conversation. Yeah.
I mean, I think about the some of the conversation that's been going on. I think about in the state of Wisconsin in terms of anti-union and sort of anti-education, educator, some of that sort of rhetoric that's come about. And one of the sort of interesting footnotes with this report is actually that while year over year there's been employment growth in the nonprofit world, there's actually been market share reduction in some of the key areas in terms of education and health and social assistance. The actual only nonprofit field that's actually gained market share over these last 10 years is the arts and recreation. So there is still this sense in which the for-profit world is taking over, and yet there needs to be more of a conversation about the nonprofit world in terms of providing jobs. And
I think you're onto something, because it's good for people to recognize that nonprofit doesn't mean that you don't sell things or charge fees. It means that there's not shareholders who benefit additionally within that business. So the way a lot of businesses work, if they're privately owned, is someone reaps the reward of the success. Where in a nonprofit, that reward has to go back into the organization. And you hear a lot of conversation. Those who pay attention to the political winds will hear a lot of conversation over the next 9 months around this presidential race, because Mitt Romney is going to be the nominee, I think, and Mitt Romney is going to be having an argument that he wants to make that says that people who do business the way he does, which is investment business, are really the essential driver for creating jobs in this country. And what's interesting is nonprofits have added jobs during 2 recessions, and they're not driven by that shareholder, stockholder benefiting model. So I think there's something interesting where you don't have to drag all nonprofits into a presidential debate, but I think it's another data point, another conversation inclusion for people who want to say, what is it that makes an extraordinarily complex global economy work? Well, in this country, one of the things that creates such great life for people is in the areas where there is a strong, healthy social service industry. Because the report that you link to and is on the Doug Pagitt Radio page on Facebook, so people can look at it themselves if they want to, shows the regions that have a strong nonprofit sector, and they're also the places in the country that have the most thriving economies and have the highest level of quality of life. Like, there seems to be a connection between those two things.
Right.
At least, from someone like me who decides to read this and then stick my own meaning in it.
Right. well, we're all interpreting, so
yeah.
I think you're right.
Well, Steve, thanks for bringing this to our attention, and for all that you do for all that you do. Any websites or anything that you're up to that you want to plug to the good listeners of Doug Pagitt Radio? Who would say,
sure.
Yeah.
To the little rascals.
To the little rascals, to our little gang of kids that we have around here on the show.
Well, I'm just coming back from a great planning meeting for the Wild Goose Festival this summer. WildGooseFestival.org. Some amazing people doing fantastic work in the nonprofit world who are involved in this festival at the intersection of justice, spirituality, and art. And here in North Carolina, come on out in June and spend a few days in the woods experiencing this beautiful Wild Goose Festival community.
June in the woods in North Carolina. I can't think of a better place.
Beautiful.
I'm hearing the Deliverance theme in my head.
That's right. You've got really pretty lips. WildGooseFestival.com is where you can find that information, and there'll be a link there. And Steve Knight, spelled with a K, is also all over the social streams. So if you want to look him up, there'll be a link for him on the Facebook page of Doug Pagitt Radio as well.
And if I could interject one other quick plug, HopePartnership.info. This is the work that I'm doing now with the Disciples of Christ denomination, and go check that out if you want to know more about.
Say it one more time.
HopePartnership.info.
HopePartnership.info, and you'll find Steve Knight. Hey, Steve, thanks for being on the show and for pointing this report out to us.
Thanks, Doug. Thanks, John.
See ya.
Stick around for the Right on Doug Pagitt Radio on AM 950, progressive voice of Minnesota, and DougPagittRadio.com.